Do you get the countdown on your side?
Yeah, I get the countdown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Also, you got a new. This is new computer, Scott. New computers are great and awful all at the same time.
So if anybody's listening, my sound's crap. It's because I haven't got a mic, because I haven't got a USB port in my blooming new Mac. Damn you, Apple. Never mind.
Oh, I know.
I know.
Yeah, it's insane.
Do you kind of dread when you get like a new piece of gear, specifically, you know, like a new laptop or something like that? Because you have to update everything, right? And you've got, I'm not sure, do you use Pro Tools or what do you use?
Oh man, I was a Pro Tools user for a long time, and then I switched to Ableton, and then I wanted it to be simple and all integrated, and so I had no Logic. So I still use all three of those, but typically, mostly for the recording stuff that I do, just the simple overdub stuff, I'm using Logic.
Logic,
yeah. I think, man, like buying a new computer it's like $3,000 or whatever it is, like if you're in the Apple ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And it's the most unfun $3,000 you'll ever spend. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't do anything new. It's not like, oh, the computer, now the computer is going to make me an omelet.
Yeah,
you know, it just does the same thing, but maybe a little faster, or like, but it is like one of the most unfun purchases to make.
What have you got? What computer have you got? Have you got a desktop?
Got a 2000. It's a laptop. Yeah, it's a 2018 MacBook. Dude, I limped along. Do you remember the white plastic unibody MacBooks?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Of like 2007, 2006.
Yeah.
You know those?
Did you have one for ages?
I limped along with one of those until 2018. So I had that computer for like 10 years. And then finally, I was running tracks on it for shows and stuff. And then finally, like during a show, it died.
Oh, it died on a show?
This is terrible. Yeah, dude. Thankfully, it was like at the rehearsal. And so then we just ended up not using tracks for a portion of the thing. But and it was at that point that I was like, all right, this is some Bush League. I gotta,
dude. This one, my old one with all these stickers.
Yeah,
on it. You watching? So this old one, MacBook Pro, mid 2015. So mid 2015. So like,
yeah, that's pretty old.
Old school, dude. So I got this new Mac. The speakers on this, the audio on it is just insane.
Oh, that's cool. Is it a desktop or laptop?
Insane. It's a laptop. It's insane. Okay. It's like...
Sounds great.
It's amazing. It's everything you ever wished for. It's like, it doesn't... So, I mean, like, I've got my MacBook here and I've got like a iMac here. And the iMac, the big, you know, it's almost the size of a TV, right? And the audio from the big iMac is like nowhere near as good as the little laptop.
Really?
Yeah. Nowhere near
crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So I'm definitely with you in that, you know, when I buy a new laptop, I just look at it as functional, you know, like I absolutely destroy my laptops as well. I use them every single day for hours. So they're just all scratched to hell as well. But so my point is, I don't really look forward to getting a new Mac or new computer. But when I got this and I just heard the audio, I was like,
well, that's
holy
cool.
shit, this is amazing.
Dude, that's good. They need to build in some feature at every update that is a surprise and delight. And maybe for some people out there, they're like, oh no, well the new graphics card to me is, but I have just always felt like they're just these marginal increases. I want to be blown away by the next Mac I buy. I want it to do something that like surprises me. I'm like, wow. So that sounds like a good surprise for you.
Dude, it's a good
way better audio.
Yeah, it's a good $2,500 well spent. Honestly, like it's like next level. Like I'm not sure how crap my 2015 audio was. I'm not exact. So you might get it and you'd be like, Divine, you've just told me to spend $2,500 on this thing and it's no better than what I already had. So that legit could happen. But for me, it was like it was just like another universe. It was amazing. I was just like, and even the kids and like all of us just like, we were just standing around it going like, whoa, listen to it. It's amazing.
That's amazing.
And
that's
you know
cool.
What it is? It's the bass response as well. It's so
like you hear it. You hear the
and it's a lot fatter than my other. They've gone old school. It's big and fat.
Okay, cool. the one that I have, the 2018, the speakers are definitely better than the white unibody plastic one.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like when I'm mixing videos for Instagram, I will just use the laptop as reference because I want to be able to, I love the sound actually of like bass coming through small speakers. And if you can get the bass to speak through small speakers, I think that's like, it's such a win because so many people are just, sitting on the toilet watching a video, on their phone. So it's like, you may as well make it sound good in the commode on the phone.
4 hours later.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, man,
exactly.
Honestly. The amount of times I go to the toilet and like Lisa's like, don't be taking your phone with you. Don't be taking your phone with you. I'm like, what? What?
You're like, I'm not, as you're secretly like stashing it somewhere to.
Dude, I'm exactly like that. I'm exactly like that.
Oh, I wouldn't dream. Oh, Lisa, I wouldn't dream of it. My wife is the same, dude. Emily is like,
really?
Oh, you're not taking the phone in there. I'm like, oh, no. Oh, this? No, never. And then it's like, hide it.
Hide it. Back pocket. Put it in the back pocket.
Yeah.
Right, dude. You messaged me earlier and you were like, okay, we're going to talk about getting the gig. And I had sort of like, I had 15, 20 minutes to just write down some ideas of kind of like talking about getting the gig. And I actually came up with 2 lists. So I came up with, dude, I went deep. So I've written the 10 commandments to get in the gig. Seriously, the 10 commandments to get in the gig. And I also wrote the 10 commandments to keeping the gig.
Yeah, well, because that's getting the gig is only half the battle, or even, I don't even know if it's half the battle, but keeping the gig is a big deal.
Yeah.
Wow, this sounds legit, man.
So the gigging 10 commandments, but we might have to sort of like break these out over 2 episodes. That's my worry, because otherwise we've got 20 points. And so should we just dive in? Shall I just start off with point number 1? Just for context as well. This is the 10 commandments to getting the gig. And this is in no particular order. This is just random as they kind of sort of like flowed into my brain. So number 1 is, I've written down, community is everything. Get involved in your area, or the music scene in your area, jam nights, open mic nights, local gigs, online. And remember, and I've put jam nights, open mic nights, local gigs. Obviously, all of that is pertaining to within your area, but then I finish that off and say online, as in like the online community as well, because of the world that we live in right now. I think that you can absolutely get a gig from an online connection, whether it be a recording gig or an actual physical, gig. You're going to be able to get that from people online as well. So that is my first. Community is everything. Get involved within the music scene in your area, jam nights, open mic nights, local gigs, and online. You got any thoughts about that? Anything to add to that?
I mean, immediately what it made me think of is there's this sort of thought of like, hey, we're going to go out tonight and we're going to network. And like in the very beginning for me, I remember thinking, well, I should probably print up a business card and I'm going to go out to these shows, And then in the set break, I'm going to like walk up to the guy and say, well, hello, I'm a bass player and I have a card to give you. And if you'd ever like to use me on a gig, but that's of course not like, that's insane. Yeah. I think the thing that, at least how I have experienced this sort of community thing, at least in Minneapolis, is it's more about like going out, seeing the show, supporting the people, and then over a long term befriending a bunch of these people, enjoying these bands, finding local bands and players that you love and admire, and really just setting out to admire them full stop. And becoming a friend, as opposed to kind of coming at it as this network opportunity. People can smell that from a mile away. And if you're kind of like, hey, I'm new in town and I've got here's my business card. It's just so, I personally don't respond well to that kind of thing. Like if someone just comes up, introduces themselves to me and is like, man, you're killing, cool pedal, here's my card. I'm like, yuck. To me, it's just a slower process. And the thing that I thought of too when you were saying this is we're sort of we talk about community, yet we all somehow feel also like there's this competitive thing in scenes, like who's going to get the gig? Why does this person always get the gig? I think, at least for me, the best thing that I've ever done is just really try to befriend these other bass players, even if I do feel some sort of level of competition or something, because by being their friend, I feel like then I'm going to ask them to sub a gig for me. Then hopefully they will do that in turn, you know? Yeah. Even if I feel like, oh man, even if I feel like, oh boy, if this bass player gets on this gig that I do, they're really going to like him. And then I don't know if I'll get called back. You know? And I've had that. I've had that a few times where I've even said to an artist, I'm going to give you a sub, and then I think you're never going to call me again. But I think, but that's okay, because it always comes around, you know? So instead of looking at the scene like it's full of competitors and, you know, you're going to step on each other to get the gig, I really do think that it's like about kindness and relationship. And then if you're looking at it genuinely in that regard, it comes back to you. I don't know. How have you experienced this?
All of the above, all of that you just talked about there, and just to jump off your on that point that you were just getting into, is that bass players, befriending bass players, having a relationship with bass players in the area is like key. In fact, I've moved to cities before, and my number one strategy for getting gigs was to actually go and get lessons from the most popular players in town. So
good.
Because I knew that I could play well, so I was like, I'm just going to go get lessons. I'll bond with them over some bass licks and a coffee. You know, we'll enjoy the playing vibes, and then and I won't even ask. I won't be like, hey, give me a sub gig. Like, that's not going to happen. They've got my number, you know, and just basically start the relationship like that, and then it will flourish into, hey, you know, I can't do a gig. Do you want to do this gig that I can't do? You know, and because everybody wants great. The key thing is all bass players need great subs.
True.
They need great subs and depth. We call them deps in the UK. Every bass player needs a dep, right, and a great sub. So it's not that, you know, that it's not a thing that everybody needs, because it absolutely is. So, you know, getting into the scene. Meeting all of the really popular bass players, meeting the unpopular, but you know, the guys, just getting into the scene and befriending everybody. Yeah, and I've seen people move to cities and go through this. And to your point, it takes longer than you think. It takes a long time. I've seen people come to Leeds, and it takes 6 months to a 12-month period to really get ingrained, so they're sort of like friends with people. They're not the new guy or the new girl. Everybody's sort of like digging off their vibe, and then they're going to start getting gigs and stuff like that. And I've also seen people move to cities like Leeds or London, and they don't stick it out. They don't stick it out. They'll do like 3 months, or they'll do 6 months, and then like, oh, they're not getting the calls, and then they bail. So I think that for anybody listening to this, just set your expectations correctly. It's a long road. You know, it's a long road in terms of getting ingrained into a community. And I think
you have to invest, right?
You've definitely got to invest a lot of time. You know, I saw somebody do it really well in London, actually. They moved to London, and I talked to him specifically about it. And how he went about it, and he said he was just militant about going to all the jam sessions where all of the players were that he wanted to play with. And he said he'd go every single week without fail. He was going to like 2 or 3 jam sessions, the same ones. And he said, so after like a couple of months, he said people knew who he was, and they were like recognizing him, and he was doing that whole thing. But he said there was like, I can't remember the exact amount, so I'm going to make one up, but it was something along the lines of, like, literally 50% of the time, I did not want to go. I just didn't want to go. But I knew that was the barrier to entry, was I needed to turn up. So he was investing his time in becoming part of that community, and the byproduct of that is that obviously he became part of the community and then met loads of like-minded musicians. They didn't see him as some kind of guy that was like wandering around sort of like, you know, trying to sell himself. They saw somebody who really loved the scene and was part of it, and then therefore started getting gigs. And he was also getting lessons as well from some of the bigger players in that area, and that paid off because he became the sub drummer as well. So
yeah, sure.
Just, you know,
And that thing about lessons too is so good. And I think that sometimes if you consider yourself a pro, or there's this thing about like, well, I don't know that I need lessons, or I don't know that I want to take lessons. And if that's you, if you're listening to this and thinking that, get that, like scrub that. Because really sometimes what a lesson is just an opportunity to create a relationship. It's not necessarily like you need to go and learn your 2-octave mode fingerings from the excellent bass teacher in town. It's more like you're going to get on their radar, right? And it's almost a fast track in a sense. Like I notice too that when I have done lessons even online with people and I develop a relationship with them, I'll start to follow them. I'll start to hip them to things. Then we have rapport. And if someone just DMs me cold, we don't build that same kind of rapport. So think about a lesson that you take either, I mean, this applies online as well, either locally or, via Zoom or Skype. Think of it as an investment in your relationships. And this Absolutely. Business, as I know you know this, Scott, but this business actually isn't about music. It's about people. This is a PR business.
Yeah, absolutely.
More than it is really like about music. I mean, yes, you have to have your skills together, but you also have to have your PR skills together. So
Absolutely.
Much.
Okay, so that was point number 1. Community is everything. Get involved in your area. Jam nights, open mic nights, local gigs, online. But add to that, obviously, get lessons from great players, create relationships with great bass players, and really set your expectations in terms of how long it's going to take. It's going to take a while. Don't be one of the guys or the girls that bounce too early. Number 2.
Oh, yeah. Number two. Moving on.
Number 2. Don't be afraid of taking low-paying gigs. It's the free trial. Okay, so We were talking about this last week, so let me just give context to this. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy about, you shouldn't take low-paying gigs. It is driving down the bar in terms of how much people will, gig for and stuff like that.
It's a big eye roll for me.
Yes, you're devaluing music by taking low-paying gigs and all of that good stuff, right? We talked about it last week, and my point was there is always going to be low-paying gigs. There's always going to be low-paying gigs, and great players are always going to be doing low-paying gigs as well, because the dudes, the dudes and the dudettes, sometimes they just want to go down and play great music, and if they get $15 for it, they're happy. You paid for their fuel or whatever, and they play great music. So there's always actually going to be low-paying gigs. And I see and saw when I moved to this area in Leeds, when I moved here, is that those low-paying gigs were my entry point into the scene. It was like, hey, we've got this low-paying gig, and this guy, he might not want to do it because like he's a bit further up the ladder, but this young guy called Scott, he might do it. Do you want to do it? And and there's me, and then 3 other great players on that gig, and that was my opportunity to get in and just put my best foot forward and try and create a relationship, but also give people sort of like a good vibe for what I am as a musician and all of that good stuff. So, and what I likened to it last week when we were talking about this is the free trial. When you sort of like, when you get to a bit of software, it's like, hey, do you want a 14-day free trial? If you go to scottsbasslessons.com, hey, do you want a 14-day free trial? It is the free trial. It's the musicians in your area. Yeah, you're getting your fuel paid for or your taxi cab paid for. You're not getting anything that's going to pay the rent or the mortgage. It might buy you a can of beans, I'm not sure. But that is the free trial. It's your opportunity to get in among the players that are actually on the scene, do the thing that you do, and hopefully they'll dig it and you'll get more well-paying gigs from it. And for me, that strategy just like paid off time and time and time again. I met most of the players on this scene actually in Leeds doing low-paying gigs, and then that's where all of the better-paying gigs came from. I don't know. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. I think people that complain about, the low-paying gigs, or people that are doing gigs on Fiverr or whatever, I mean, that's just dinosaur stuff, man. I think you can disregard that. I think if you don't have brand recognition, name recognition, a big gig under your belt, you're starting out, you don't have those things. What you have, you don't have any leverage. So what you have is time, right? If you don't have brand, you have time, and that's your most valuable asset. So time to spend on preparing for this gig, on looking for the gig, on taking the gig that doesn't pay very much, right? In order to build your repertoire and your resume. thought a long time ago that I needed to have rates, and someone would say, how much do you charge for a gig? And I'd say, this much money. And they'd say, yikes, that's too much. And who the hell are you? Anyway, and I'd say, well, I'm a professional bass player. And I lost so many opportunities as a result of thinking in that kind of like stodgy old business mindset. And then, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before on the pod, but I saw JMJ, Justin Meldal Johnson, talk about this thing where he talked about if he gets asked to do something and he thinks it's cool, like he thinks the opportunity sounds exciting to him for whatever reason. And we all know what that feels like. If someone says, hey, do you want to do this? And you get excited, you get that welling feeling of excitement. Ooh, cool. You should do it. Follow that. Because what will happen is if you do enough of that stuff that feeds you, you're going to really invest in it. Other artists that are in the similar vein might check you out. It might lead to your thing, right? So that's how it's been for me. I have really followed that idea, especially early on, of like, if it sounds cool to me and I get excited about it, I'm going to say yes to it, even if the dollar value is low, because I think that's going to lead to more happiness in my career in terms of artistic happiness. So that's how I look at that. I think it's huge. Take the gigs.
Take the gigs.
Take the gigs for free. Yeah.
Don't be afraid of taking low paying gigs. And the reason why I put that in as well is because I heard, or I have heard of a lot of students over the last few years that are kind of not really feeling it, that are quite kind of sort of like pushing against the low paying gig thing. And I just wanted to point out that for me, it was huge in terms of my development as a gigging musician, and also just kind of sort of like repositioning what it is. It's a free trial, and when you go and do the low paying gig, do the best job possible. We talked about that last week as well. Yes. It's the free trial. As in, can you imagine if you signed up to a bit of software? It says, take your 14-day free trial. You sign up to that bit of software, and then they don't really give you a great experience. They give you like a pretty substandard experience. And maybe if he becomes a paying customer, then we'll give him the
we're really going to roll it out for you.
Then we'll roll it out. Or when somebody signs up to SBL, take the 14-day free trial, but understand that you're not going to get a really great experience until you become a paying member, right? It's the same thing here, right? And also, again, I also said it last week, is that when it comes to and this is just to clarify, because people might take what we're saying and apply it to other areas in terms of gig and musicianship, like bands and stuff like that. So it's not a one size fits all, in that when I was part of my better half, my wife, was running a corporate events band, and she was running a quartet, right? And that quartet, if you went to the agency, okay, and you typed our name in the agency, quartets available within that genre, we were the highest, our what we charged was the highest out of all of the bands. So what I'm not saying is we should all, gig for zero and go out and, charge no money, because that is a race to the bottom. So in terms of pricing yourself as a band and all of that, that is a different, what we're talking about here is like getting gigs. We're not talking about pricing strategy when it comes to bands and corporate events and weddings and stuff like that. Again, that is a whole separate conversation. What you don't want to do is be the cheapest within the market. That is a complete separate conversation.
You don't want to be the budget option.
You don't want to be the budget option. You actually want to be the premier option. That's what you want to be. But again, that is a completely different conversation really from what we're talking about now.
And that comes to, and you're so right. But don't you think, though, that comes after a bit of journey? Like, being the premier option, you don't deserve or have the opportunity to be the premier option until you've done a lot of these other things first.
Yeah, the learning opportunity, right?
Yeah, right. So taking the low-paying gigs, or taking the thing that feels exciting and creative, that maybe doesn't pay a lot of money, will get you to be the premier option. And if you're going, geez, what are some metrics to decide on some of these things? Go back and listen to the Gig Triangle, or potentially the Gig Square pod episode. The Gig Square episode. Yeah. Because Scott added another side to the shape. I think we talk a lot about the things that go into deciding about happiness, or if you should or shouldn't take or stay in a particular gig situation. And that could really help you out if you're going, well, gosh, I really love the people, but oh, there's no money and I hate the music. Ooh, you know what I mean? Like, then you only got 1 out of 3. Oh, and the musicianship is terrible. Now you only got 1 out of the 4, right? And maybe not be a gig to take, right? But in the beginning, especially if you're trying to build this idea of yourself in a market, to build your personal brand, or even if you just want to be playing and you're not thinking about building yourself up as a brand, taking those low-paying gigs at the beginning, it cannot hurt you.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And you'll meet some great players doing it as well.
Yeah.
And you'll get your ass kicked doing it as well, which is really important. Well, okay, next up. So number 2, was don't be afraid of taking low-paying gigs. It is the free trial. Number 3 is have a level of visibility online. I think like this isn't sort of like absolutely needed, but I think that it helps, because the way I see it, especially when you're maybe like new in a scene, it can be your CV. Like people want to see you play. And I think that having an Instagram account where you're visible and you're posting and you're being creative and you're doing what you're doing, I think it absolutely cannot hurt. And I've actually heard of, I can't remember who it was, but they actually got hired off of Instagram by this like huge, I can't remember who the musician was. It was like Stanley Clark. Maybe it was Stanley Clark. I think that it was Stanley Clark. He hired the last drummer he was working with from seeing them on Instagram or like YouTube or something like that, and was just like, this guy's awesome, and hired them. So, you know, it happens.
I mean, you know, it happens more than ever, and it will continue to happen. It will continue to be the place where people go. Right now, social has all the eyes. It has the attention. It's not going to change anytime soon. I mean, platforms may change, but social media as a concept of seeing what you're up to will not change for a long time. Yeah. And so, yeah, to have some kind of strategy about like, well, I want to have this, so I think I want to post. I mean, I genuinely love it. I'm one of those, I don't know if it's rare, but I talk to people who are like, oh, I hate it. I know I should, but I genuinely love.
I think it's a habit thing, man. I think it's a habit.
Yeah,
thing.
Could be. Yeah, I've figured out a lane on Instagram, and I really enjoy doing it. I mean, I know a bunch of opportunities that have come up for me in the last. The last 4 years have been a result of Instagram. I mean, working with you, I'm here with you right now because of
Instagram. Yeah, absolutely,
yep. And there have been gigs. The biggest gig I ever played with Gavin DeGraw, Target Field, opening up for Billy Joel. That was via Instagram. It started with a relationship first, actually. Steve Gould, the drummer, told the band, oh, this guy'd be great. Then they were like, well, how can we see this guy? Instagram. And I find that people want to check out your social media more than they want to maybe check out your website, unless you're selling a product or something. But if you're a player and you want to get gigs, Instagram or TikTok probably even more so. As we journey into the mid 2020s.
I was going to ask you, what's your? Because people might be listening to us talking now, and might be thinking, oh, okay, well, which platform? What is it for you? Give them context for you.
I mean, I'm 43, so Instagram was so cool. Like as Facebook was sort of like, well, oh man, now, your parents and grandparents are on Facebook, and it's sort of like aging up. Instagram was the thing. So I got really comfortable on that platform. TikTok comes along. People are like, oh, it's just 13-year-old girls dancing. And when old people poo-poo a platform that's getting huge, like, oh, that's actually a tell that it's going to be massive. I think TikTok will become what Instagram was in 2016, kind of the hip, hot thing. And I mean, they're doing so many business things right. They're allowing tips now. There are so many businesses that are advertising there. It's a monster platform. I mean, my biggest community is on Instagram, but I've certainly got eyes on TikTok.
Yeah,
sure.
Me for sure, man. Me for sure. And I think that like my favorite as a user of social media is Instagram's my favorite.
Yeah.
Interestingly, just for sort of like side note, interesting. I had a conversation just before I hopped on here with you, actually, with a great guy called Tushar, who works on the ad side of SBL. So he's the guy that sort of like helps us manage all of that side of what we do. And we were talking about Facebook, actually, and like Tushar is like when it comes to actually sort of like understanding sort of like what's going on in the background of all of these social media channels like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and really kind of like what's going on. He's got sort of, he's got direct sort of like contact with like, you know, people that are managing those platforms, etc., etc. And I was like, dude, what's going on with Facebook? I was like, where are we going with it? And he was like, dude, Facebook's going to go away. That's what he said. He was like, Facebook's going to go away. He was like, and I was like, whoa, you know. And I think they are. Yeah. I think that the renaming, I think that they're going to go in a lot of different directions. So I think that they know it. It's, exciting stuff.
I mean, I wonder how long it will take people to start using the word meta instead of Facebook. Like, will everyone transition to saying meta versus Facebook? I don't know.
Do you know what? It's actually weird that the pronunciation of meta in the UK is actually not. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as in the States. Like you guys say meta, but we say meta. It's kind of sort of like quite angular.
It's a bit more of a mouthful.
It's angular. It's like, hey, have you been on Meta? It's kind of angry, you know, like, Meta. Yeah.
Oh, you got your teeth in it.
Yeah. So I was wondering when I saw that a news article saying that they've rebranded it Meta. I was like, I wonder if we are going to adopt some kind of like have a US slant on how we pronounce that in the future, or whether we're still going to go Meta. Meta, man.
It's really easy, man. You just make that T a D, and you're all good. Meta. Yeah.
It's so fun, isn't it? Anyway, number 4. So number 3 was have a level of visibility online. Number 4, I think this is so important, is create your own projects. Don't wait for the doorbell to ring. Ooh. Take control. And just for context on this, this is something that I wish I'd done way earlier. I was definitely one of the dudes who was sort of like just waiting for the doorbell to ring, right?
Yes.
And then into my life swooped this guy who I randomly ended up sort of like sharing his house with, and he was just like not waiting for the doorbell to ring. He was creating the gigs. He just came along and he just started. He had his own projects. He was writing his own music. He was like, hey, who are the great players in town? I was like, this guy. He was like, wicked. How do I meet them? I was like, oh, just go down to these gigs. You'll meet them. He was down there, and then like 2 weeks goes by. Those great players are in our front room rehearsing his music with him. He didn't wait for He didn't wait for the doorbell to ring. He created the gig. He created it. So from seeing that, it was just sort of like mind blowing, and really actually had a big part in the start of SBL as well. I wouldn't have really started SBL, I don't think, if it was. I was just in that mindset of just waiting. I was just like waiting for somebody to
practice. Wait and see who calls.
Waiting for somebody, and then going through that experience. I definitely started my own projects, but the biggest one that I ever created. But it was definitely off the back of really seeing Gaz do that. It was a guy called Gaz Parry. But seeing him create Gaz Parry,
name, dude.
Yeah, Mr. Parry. But it was seeing him kind of like own his own projects that really gave me the kick up the arse that I needed to, hey, go start your own thing. And SBL was it for me, but it could have been my own gigs as well, you know.
Did it almost feel like permission too? Like
it was absolutely
yeah, right. Like you didn't even know you could, kind of, or like, you didn't have the wherewithal to think, well, I'm going to be a band leader, or I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or I'm going to be a songwriter. Like, I think sometimes people just don't maybe look big enough or dream big enough, and they sort of think, well, I need to take a gig, so I'm gonna just kind of wait and see. I'll practice. I'm really good when the phone calls, and it's almost like playing defense, where there needs to be a level of offense, right?
Oh, dude, there's so many. Even just thinking locally, there is so many great players that are just sitting on their ass waiting for the call, and they could be doing something amazing. They're great players. And they just really need to create that opportunity for themselves. But I think that exactly what you were talking about, I think that they just don't see themselves as that. They just see themselves, or I think they don't see themselves as that, so that holds them back. They're probably a little insecure about being the guy or the girl that's sort of like at the center
fronting something.
Yeah. It feels maybe a little bit obnoxious. Obviously that's total BS, but just, because we are who we are, and we have insecurities and stuff like that. And then also, I'm going to say it, some people are a little hard of hard work.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
They're just a little hard work.
Old school, like, is that like an old heart of hard work? Is that like an old school UK thing? That's some like blue collar UK. That's some farm boy. That's some divine farm boy stuff, man.
You know, like,
I love it.
I actually offended somebody a few years ago. Just, I'm just gonna say exactly what I said.
Please.
I just said, we were in this guy's living room and everybody was just kind of sort of like moaning about them being no gigs. I was like, but dudes, let's just be real, right? Just most musicians, we're just a bit shit, aren't we? Just getting stuff together and making it happen.
Sure.
And they were like, no. And there was this sort of like, and he was really offended. And I was like, no, seriously, man, we are. Do you know what I mean? Like, how many people do you know that fall out of bed at like 10 in the morning?
Right.
And then they're sort of like, you know, shuffling around in the slippers, sort of like munching on the Rice Krispies or whatever. Maybe it gets to sort of like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They're like, I might pick up my bass. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, get real, dude. I was like, really, we're not great when it comes to sort of like getting stuff together and making it happen. And I didn't know that I'd really offended him to like a couple of years later, actually. When he became really successful. He became really, So
amazing.
This is the best thing, right? So he actually worked his ass off and became really successful. And we were speaking years afterwards, and he was like, "Can I tell you something?" I was like, "Yeah, go for it, man." He was like, "Do you know when you said that we're just really shit?" He was like, "You actually really offended me." He was like, "You really offended me." And he said, and it's only now, like a few years later, after I'd sort of like, I've grinded my balls off and sort of like bled through my eyeballs, actually putting in a lot of work, that I can reflect on what you said back then and be like, oh, you're right.
100%, dude. Really, I mean, you know, typically, like if something like that offends someone, it's because it's digging into truth, right? It's like it's uncovering something that you're trying to hide.
Yeah.
And check this out. Let's stay on this for just a second, because I think that when I used to hear this of like, get off your ass, start your own project, I felt like that was only in like a band space. Like, okay, now I need to write my own music, hire players, and become a band. And that was so daunting to me. So like, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, geez, I'm not really a songwriter. I don't even know that I'm a band leader. Check it out. I did something in 2004 or 5 maybe, where Lakeland, Scott, do you remember Lakeland?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's still a company making great basses out of Chicago, but at the time they were owned by the first guy that owned the company, that made the company, named Dan Lakin. And I had played some of their cheaper instruments, their Skyline instruments, that were amazing, and then they made these US basses that were really expensive. I was just out of college and I was totally broke, and I was gear hound, still am, like, obviously. And my goal was, I just wanted one of those nice US basses. I could never pay for it. So what I decided to do, there was a music shop in town that had some Skylines, and I had a couple of friends that had them. I gathered, I think, 4 of them that I didn't own, and I recorded clips. One was a P bass, one was a jazz bass. I think one was the Jerry Sheff model. It had those like lipstick Kent Armstrong pickups in it. Yeah. And a 5502, which is their kind of Stingray meets Fender. That was their sort of flagship model. And I recorded... and I even got some friends, my band, like my rock band, we recorded some tracks. We recorded like a punk rock sounding thing, a hard rock sounding thing, and then like a country, and then I think I did a slap thing. So 4 genres. And then I put all of these basses over all the genres, and I did them by pickup. So neck pickup on each one, both pickups on each one, bridge pickup on each one, and then I burned a CD, dude, because that's what you did then. Imported all that stuff into iTunes, burned a CD, and mailed it to Lakeland.
And check it out, and I listened to all of those clips. In the UK. Yeah. Of course I did, as well as like all of the rest of the bass community. It was massively valuable. Anyway, tell the rest of your story.
Yeah. Well, no. It's great. I mean, it's so funny because now I talk to people who are like, wait, that was you?
Yeah.
Because at the time, YouTube hadn't been invented yet, which is wild. And no one was doing it. No one was putting up sound clips. And I remember there were a few people at Lakeland. So Dan called me and was like, this is cool. Like, who are you? You know, and I was like, yeah, I'm just this guy, and I love your instruments, and And he was like, you should come out. So my girlfriend, who became my wife, Emily, we drove to Chicago and met with Dan. And he was like, yeah, I think this is cool. And we hung out, and he saw that I, could form a sentence, and, was a nice guy. And, you're just not sure, when you can't Skype or, there was no iPhones. I mean, man, but the crazy thing was there was a clear goal for me. And even though it may seem kind of like a silly goal, I wanted, a US Lakeland bass guitar.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, how can I get that? And I don't want to save up for 3 years. I want to get it in 6 months.
Yeah.
What if I could do some work for them that provided some value, right? And so it was about just figuring out a project.
Yeah.
And there were people that poo-pooed it like, oh man, but what if it's maple and rosewood? And I'm like, what are you? No, what this is going to do, what I saw it as an interface. So if there was a customer that was interested in a bass and they got to click on things on the website, the more things they got to click on, the better.
Yeah.
It almost didn't even matter what the instruments sounded like. I mean, I think they sounded good, and I tried to make them sound good. I mean, although I go back and listen now, and I'm like, oh, I would have done the production so much differently. But I was in my 20s, and and I just thought this would give a user, I would want to be able to use this function on a website, on Modulus's website, on Tobias, the MTD website, and so it was just this idea of, let's see if we can give users more fun, which is definitely going to lead to more sales. And they paid me in basses, and I think I helped them sell a bunch of instruments.
Exactly.
So it was it was good.
Exactly.
And it was a thing that I had created out of thin air. And everyone can do the same thing.
Exactly. I think that the high level thing here is that you created your own opportunity, right? You didn't wait for anybody. You didn't wait for Dan to give you a call. Hey, do you want to make some bass clips? You actually went and did it.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's never going to happen, is it? So whether it's doing a project or doing something like that, you can actually create your own opportunity. And I think there's so many opportunities for people to really lean into. So I really, really invite people to have a think about that. Create your own projects. Don't wait for the doorbell to ring. Take your own control. That was number 4. Number 5, halfway through almost. Number 5, learn tunes. Work on your repertoire. Jazz, pop, rock, all of the above. You'll be more employable.
Yes.
I'll just say my piece, and then obviously you can take it. I think this is so important. I think it's really important to just have a repertoire of tunes that and it is all of the stuff that you probably think I'm talking about. I mean, it's really important to know I Want You Back. It's really important to know all of those sort of like old classics, and really somebody should put, there probably is sort of like a list out there, isn't there, for sort of like, pop tunes you should know, sort of like 60s to modern day, but really all of the great players in and around the areas and that I've worked in all throughout my career, those great players, they just know a bunch of tunes. And if you're specializing in a certain area, like jazz, for instance, you need to learn a bunch of jazz tunes, and you need to work on your repertoire it's a skill set in itself. If you're thinking, well, I'm a rock player, it's not really something rock players do. Well, you are wrong. You are wrong, my friend. I went to the Lucky Strike, right? Who's playing there? So Billy Sheehan's there, Nuno Betancourt's there. There's just like a bunch of freak show awesome players, right?
Wow.
These guys played all night long, and they knew all the tunes. They knew all the Zeppelin tunes. They knew, they just knew all of those classic rock tunes. They knew Whitesnake tunes. It was just amazing. And I was like, holy cow. I was like, there's jazz standards. There's like hard rock standards as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just really important that you work on your repertoire and learn tunes, because when you get on a gig with people, they're going to really love it when they're like, hey, should we just do? And you're like, oh yeah, wicked. I know that tune. It's a level of comfort for the musicians you're working with. What about you? What do you think?
I 100% agree. I just want to ask you this. Pretend 22-year-old is listening who's hasn't dug into the repertoire yet, wants to, but it feels so daunting. So learn all the jazz standards, learn all the blues standards, learn all the rock standards. My question to you is, how. So yeah, we can jump on YouTube and try to find the list. But if you're in that position, Scott Devine, what do you do to, like, let's say the rock wedding band standards, Motown rock music, 80s, 90s Motown, maybe a couple of jazz standards, maybe At Last is thrown in there for a ballad. How do you actually learn that apart from a YouTube lesson?
I'll tell you how I have learned it in the past. And maybe, like, I think I would probably go, I guess the difference is that I probably go about it different now to what I did back then. I didn't really understand the importance of a repertoire, I don't think, when I started. And I think sort of like looking back, I was like, oh shit, you should have got it together and sort of like learned some tunes faster. So how I actually went about it is I definitely did learn some tunes. So on the jazz side, I was like, I need to learn some standards. So I learned sort of like 5 to 10 kind of like key standards, you know, that everybody kind of sort of like knows if you're going to be playing in sort of like jazz type ensembles. And what you find is once you've learned sort of like 10 standards, a lot of the same progressions start repeating themselves and stuff that. So I did that. I definitely learned sort of like, you know, around 10 standards way back when. And then with the pop stuff, I actually learned a lot of it preparing for gigs. Honestly, like I just had a lot of gigs where it's like, okay, you know, we've got to do this gig. Here's the 40 tunes you've got to learn. You know, so I just had to learn them. So I just like sit down there and I just learn the tunes. And I am a prepper, man. I am like, just like you, right? I'm like a real prepper. I will actually, and I've done this at various points in my life. If I've got a bunch of tunes to learn, I will get up in the morning. I will have my breakfast. Obviously, this is pre-kids, right? Because now I get up in the morning, I make everybody else's breakfast, and I even forget to, like this morning, I was like, something's not right. I feel a bit weird. Oh, it's because it's like 11:30 in the morning and I haven't eaten anything because I just fed everybody else except myself. Anyway, rewind. So back in the day, I'd get up, I'd have my breakfast, and then I'd sit down and I would just learn those tunes for the gig all morning. And then I would have my lunch and then I would learn them and I'd practice with the tapes. I'd write them out. I'd practice more with the tapes. I'd be listening to them all the time. So I'd really commit to learning those tunes. And I did it kind of in these sort of like cramming sessions where it was, you know, I've got 40 tunes to learn. The gig's in 2 weeks. Go. You know, just insanity. You know, learning. Oh, and by the way, it's $50. You know, and you're like, just going back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, remember, it's a free trial. You want to give people massive value in that free trial. Even if it's a $50 gig, you need to absolutely blow people away. They're like, I cannot believe that this guy's putting so much work and he's only getting $50. That's what people should be coming away from that gig saying, whoa, he nailed it, and it's only $50.
Exactly. Okay. Yes.
So that's how I learned. How would I change that? If I was going through it again, I think I probably would have been a little more systematic about it. I think I would have done probably what I did with the jazz tunes, I would have done with the pop and the Motown and stuff like that. So I would have tried to learn sort of like 5 to 10 Motown classics. I think I would have tried to learn, you know, 5 to 10 rock classics. Just get them under my fingers, just so I understood the genre a little bit more.
Understanding the genre. Yes. That's a great call.
Pop as well, you know, understanding sort of like some pop, those pop standards that are going to get called on, you know, function gigs and corporate events and stuff like that. I would have just been a little bit more systematic about it. And then when it comes to actually how to learn them, sitting down there, writing the song structure out, playing along with the videos, and then trying to get rid of it and trying to play it from memory, because all of that's a muscle, isn't it? Like learning that
for sure
is a muscle. So, and for instance, I was talking to I think it was like Lee Sklar. I was talking to a friend, and like Lee Sklar got the call to do the Toto gig, and he had something like 2 days to prepare for it. It's something bonkers, right?
Yes.
And turned up and nailed the gig. And that is that he's been pumping that muscle all his life. He will be able to, same as like other guys that I've seen, like do similar, not the Toto thing, but I've sort of like seen kind of just like learn rapid like fang songs super fast, like Sean Hurley, John Button, you know, like over in LA, they're just really fast at learning songs. So it is a muscle that needs to be worked. Just like when you go to the gym, or or so I've been told. You know, you go on your leg day, you know, and you tear it out. You do your back day or whatever. Do they have a back day? I'm not sure. But anyway, let me know in the comments. But it's just the same. It is a muscle that needs to be worked. So that is that's how I deal with it now, I think.
And you've talked too before about like throwing yourself into an uncomfortable situation in order to, you know, make gains. And I love the idea too of like, okay, how to get the gig. Yeah, learn these tunes, but offer yourself into a situation that might feel uncomfortable. If you don't really know how to play the blues, learn a couple of tunes and then go to a jam and you'll learn how to do it. If you don't know how to play jazz, find some people to do a brunch. Learn a few tunes and go and do it, because by doing it, by really putting your feet in the fire, you're going to learn how to navigate that genre. And I know I've maybe told this story before, but briefly, I didn't know how to play Motown music or like soul music very well. I got offered to sub a gig. It was $100. It was 70 tunes. The great Nick Salisbury in town here. The band was called the Irresistibles, amazing band. And I said, I kind of moaned. I said like, and he said, well, let me ask. He goes, let me ask you this. He goes, how well do you know this bag of tunes? And I was like, not very well. And he said, well, what if you went to study with someone? And you went to study this genre, what would they make you do? And I said, learn tunes. And he said, second question, would they pay you? And I said, no.
What a dude. Would they pay you?
I mean, right. So, you know, it's about mindset. You talk about this all the time. It's about mindset. It's about saying, wow, I'm going to get $50 to essentially have a crash course lesson on all of the best songs that you would play at someone's wedding, or all the great jazz standards that I'm going to play at this brunch, or all of the classic blues turnarounds that I'm going to learn at the night at Famous Dave's Barbecue in the States. You know, like, it's, you have to look at it as an opportunity to learn a new bag. And then what happens to your playing is it goes, you just click up.
It does,
You get
absolutely,
click. Yeah. And you've made a little bit of money in the process. Incredible. It's incredible. So you got to learn tunes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that was number 6, learn to read. And, hang on. Number 5, learn tunes, repertoire, obviously jazz, pop, rock, all of the above. You'll be more employable. Number 6 is learn to read and write charts. And then I put notation is optional, but you've got to be able to read. Yeah, I honestly think that to be sort of like a gigging musician, you need to be able to, well, obviously, you need to be able to read charts. And that doesn't mean notation, but how many gigs have you been on where it's sort of like you need to read a chart, and they give you a chart, and it might not have notation on it, but it's going to have chord symbols on it. And you better need
numbers.
Or numbers, and you need to be able to read it on the fly as the band is playing. And that is a skill set in itself. And also, you need to learn to write them as well, because if you can't write them, then you can't read them. That's like being able to, you know, to be able to read a book, you need to be able to write, you know what I mean, within the language that you are reading. Same thing here. You need to be able to write them. You need to be able to read charts. Notation is optional. I think that it is great to read a little bit of notation, even if it's sort of like just a little bit of it, because at some point you are going to get some point in front of you. And even if you're not sort of like a crazy badass sight reader, it's great to be able to sort of like get through it anyway, even if you have to mark out with a pencil. Mr. Allison, you're looking guilty as I'm doing this.
Dude, I just have I have a tale of woe in terms of notation. I don't know if you do, but God. I do. I mean, I have tales of triumph with charts, and I have a real, like, the story, I have a real tale of woe with notation. But let me say this about charts. Charts, I had to start to really learn how to read and write charts because I was in the studio. And there would be certain producers like to work with charts, and certain artists who would show up with charts, or a lot of times what I've done a lot now, and I learned this a lot from Corey Wong. I would work with him in a studio in Wisconsin called the Drum Farm, and he would be session leader, which was the designation, essentially somebody that was kind of calling the shots for the band and writing the charts for the band. Yeah. And what would happen is the singer-songwriter would sit down, probably with an acoustic guitar, and play the song. And I remember in one instance, you know, it was a girl, like really young, probably 16, 17 years old, killing songwriter, but she didn't have a ton of experience in the studio, obviously, right? And she didn't have experience with writing any charts. She just played her tune. And so Corey then is the liaison between the artist and the band. And Corey would then furiously write out the chart as she played in real time.
Yeah.
And then maybe at the bridge, he'd say, you know what, go back to the bridge and, you know, because there was maybe an odd bar there, or there was a chord that kind of caught me off guard. And he would, you know, maybe she'd play it through one more time, and then he would have the chart written for everybody.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And then
it's real.
He would take it, yeah, right. He would take it and photocopy it, and then give everybody charts, right? And then when Corey's not there, it would be me. so I'm in that zone of like, also writing it out, you know, having my bass maybe, or that's where, you know, the ear training thing, being able to go boom, 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 boom. So hearing 1, 4, 5, 4, 1, like thinking about, okay, this is just a 1, 4, 5, 4 in the key of G or whatever. That's so critical. We should probably do a course on full-on chart writing.
Oh, we should. We should do. And just to point out as well, when these, like I can remember being in Sunset Sound. I was doing a track with over in LA. I was doing a track with a guy called Warren Hewitt. He was, I think
produce like the pros.
Yeah. I was doing a track with him.
Yeah,
this fun thing we were doing. Oh man, it was great actually, good fun. But anyway, we got to we were sitting down, and obviously he hits the playback, and we get to hear the tune, and we're all sat there with our, you know, pencils and our and you know, and this is it. And honestly, like really, like I've not got my bass on me. I could have, and like everybody else is like, there's no instruments in sight. It's just sort of like, oh, it's in the key of C. Yeah. Playback goes on, you know, and then you just start writing, right? And it's the deal. And then when you get to the end, you're exactly right. You know, somebody's like, oh, could you just take it from that midsection because there was a chord that I missed. So it plays through the midsection. Okay, no instruments in sight. We're all writing down the charts, and it's like wicked. Okay, so we go do this. Then we're into the live room, and then it's like
and then you play.
Then we play. Yeah. So anyway, all that to be said.
Pro stuff, man.
All that to be said. You need to be able to learn to read and write charts. It is not an option if you're going to be a gigging musician, gigging bass player. True. Notation is optional. Again, it's great to be able to learn to read. I am a bit of a crappy reader. I get that vibe from you as well. Ian's face says it. Ian. Hey, do you know, I was like hanging with Gary Willis. I was on a lesson with Gary Willis in my early 20s. And I had like reading anxiety. And he was like, dude, don't sweat it. He was like, I'm terrible at reading. He said, you've just got to pick what you're going to work on. And ever since that moment, I was like, I'm not going to get stressed about reading anymore. It's fine. Yeah. I have actually been sort of like a half decent reader in my past, especially when I was doing like a lot of show stuff and doing the theatre stuff. It's kind of like a muscle. For me, if you stop doing it like all the time, it kind of just goes a bit dusty. You know what I mean? It gets a bit dusty and old. Whereas like while I can remember getting out of a gig. It was like a reading gig, and I've been doing it for like, I don't know, like 6 or 7 months working with different artists, and it was all reading. So at the end of that, it was like, I felt like Superman. I was like, bring on the charts.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. I'd like sit on somebody's car and read the dead flies off the windshields. I'm like, come on. But it's not like that anymore. I'd have to blow the dust off it now. Anyway, so number 6 was learn to read and write charts. Notation is optional. Number 7, invest in your sound. Peeps love a great sounding bass. And my point here is just like invest in your sound. You know, like have a nice bass sound. It doesn't need to be an expensive bass. You just need to have like a decent sound, and also invest in your sound, and also like your amps and stuff at the same time. Meaning, like, don't get on the gig and have things sort of like fall apart, things break. The worst instance I ever saw was a bass player on stage with an artist that I'd worked with before, and his bass amp broke down, but it wasn't the first time. It was actually the second or third time it happened, and she actually stopped the song in the middle of the gig and sent him off stage.
Oh, come on, dude.
Sent him off stage, dude.
That's like a damn nightmare.
Dude, talk about the walk of shame. He had to do the walk of shame off stage. I was like, oh! So invest in your sound, you know.
It hurts.
Yeah, get like a bass that sounds great. It's going to take care of you. Get an amp that works, all of that good stuff. And then also learn about different sounds as well. Be able to create the right sound for the gig. Don't turn up on the Motown gig with the sort of like the super scooped mid and the sort of like the low, the super high treble, and just be appropriate for the gig and learn and understand sound. Anyway, what about you? Any thoughts?
Oh man, I for sure I resonate with that. I really think a lot about like what bass to bring to a session or what bass to bring to a gig. I think even tonally, it's very important. I also think aesthetically, like I don't want to show up to a jazz brunch with my '76 Gibson Thunderbird, for instance, right? Yeah. Like it's sort of like a vibe. Like just imagine, you're pulling this thing out of the case. And the first impression it makes is also really important. I'll say too, on the thing of like, don't have crappy gear that's breaking. Also, don't get so precious. This is, I'm talking to myself. Don't get so precious about your gear and get such fancy stuff that it's temperamental and not working. I had a really expensive, esoteric tube head. Oh, just the golden tone, the unicorn, so hard to find, and it was expensive. And wow, people are going to be so impressed in my sound. And then I would lug it onto these wedding gigs where I'd be playing in somebody's backyard and it would eat tubes. It would like blow out a tube. And so, we're playing My Girl in someone's backyard and I've got my stupid expensive tube amp that just flames out a tube. And then there's no bass. And that is so it's like there's a point where you can almost care too much, where you've almost gone over the point of like yes, it needs to sound good, but really what I have discovered is it needs to work. Period. Yeah. Like, yes, it needs to sound good, but will anyone notice the difference between your Ampeg SVT Classic or your old 69 Ampeg that you always have to have in the shop? And like, no, don't do that to yourself.
Exactly.
Like, buy some stuff that you really feel good about how it sounds, but also that it is always going to work, because what is our role? Our role is to provide root motion and low end. And when your DI or pedal board or string breaks or your amp eats a tube, there's no root motion and there's no low end, and therefore you are not doing your job. Right?
Absolutely. So that was number 7, invest in your sound.
Yeah.
Number 8. This is a really, really important one for me. Be a great communicator via email, text, etc. Fast and prompt replies, meaning that if somebody, and we're talking about getting the gig, right? If somebody like offers you, say, taking it back to what we were talking about earlier, right? If you're studying with somebody or you've met somebody at a jam session and, you get the text or the email and they're like, hey, have you got like a free Friday night on X date? Because we've got a gig coming up. Like, just be on that like fire.
Yes.
This actually comes from me when my wife ran a band. It used to drive her around the bend.
Oh, when people just wouldn't get back.
Oh, dude, they just went on the never again list. They were just like, 2 days? She wants to know within 24 hours, otherwise you're going on the never again list. It's just, she needs to know because she's got like a million other logistical things that she is working around and trying to organize. And she doesn't want to be like, oh yeah, I've like texted the bass player and he hasn't texted me back for like, 3-4 days or whatever. She's just like, get out of my life.
Do not keep Lisa waiting, y'all.
Do not keep Lisa waiting. No. She's like an organizational demon, She's
and you have to be, right, to run a band. So that's so good. And I mean, I have done well at that and really poorly at that. I'm actually thinking about a situation right now that someone asked me about yesterday. Actually, that I really need to just like make a decision and.
Matt, can I do a confessional? Me too.
Please.
Like right now, I'm having a nightmare right now. I've got like a gazillion emails, and I'm just it's not going well. My inbox isn't a really healthy place right now.
It's not inbox zero right now.
It is definitely not inbox zero. Do you know who I'm speaking to now? Though I'm speaking to the people that want to get a gig. Like I'm actually I'm not falling over myself right now in my life to get gigs. But I'm talking to the girl or the guy who is really wanting to get the gig. And I'm just going to say it again. You need to be a great, fast communicator by email or DM or text or whatever it is. Don't listen to Ian and I. We're like, we're rocking the 40s with the bass dads, and we're doing our thing, and we're not falling over ourselves to get the gig. But if I was, I'd be like lightning. It'd be like lightning. I'd reply before they press send. They'd be like, whoa!
Like, how did this happen?
It's so important because it relieves so much anxiety on the other side. So the person who's organizing the gig, honestly, if there's a band of 4 or 5 people, because they're dealing with musicians and inherently we're all just a bit crap sometimes because we're arty and that's just the way it is. Okay, just be the person that just removes that anxiety, so she can or he can worry about the other 4 people, that are not hitting them back straight away. You just hit them back straight away, and that is like just such a gold star for the next time she's looking for somebody to hire. She's like, oh, I'm just going to get that one because they replied straight away.
And also, if you get that call, text, whatever, and kind of deep down that it's a no, but maybe you kind of feel bad about saying no, and you wait a day, you wait another day, you wait another day, and then you say no.
Oh.
You are a piece of shit. And I'm talking to myself, Scott. I've done that, man. Where
hey, dude, we've all done it. We've all done it. But we just have to call it out, right? I think it's good. I think it's good, man. I was talking to Aaron yesterday. We were talking about something that we've done, and we were actually redoing it. And I was like, oh, it's such a piece of shit. He was like, oh, you're so harsh. I was like, dude, it's just the truth. It's just the truth. The truth, yeah.
Yeah. Like, after this, I want you to go back in and ask Lisa, all right, back in the day when she was hitting up people to play those gigs, if someone didn't get back to her for 4 days and then said no, I mean, that's like drop them through a trap door into the fiery pits of hell.
Oh, dude. Do you know what? Like Lisa's hired a bunch of people. So she'll take a fast responder over a great player.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that is true across the board, but for a lot of people, they'll take a fast responder, somebody who's just organized and just responsive and just sort of like a really great communicator. They will take you over sort of like a great player. So it's actually
because it locks it down.
Yeah.
Then you get to move on to another fire that you have to put out.
Yeah, exactly.
Bass isn't the only fire.
Yeah, so if you're just starting out on the scene, it's actually a superpower that you can just grab straight away. It takes zero practice.
So good.
I mean, zero practice. You're not going to have to sweat it. I mean, it's just all you need to do is just be like super fast in responding and super organized. Oh, so that was number 8, be a great communicator.
So good, man. That's really good.
This is going to be a funny one for you, right? Well, not for you specifically, but you're gonna know somebody that doesn't do this, right? And number 9.
I hope it's not me.
It's not you, dude. Number 9, get a driving license. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be that girl or guy. Get a driving license. Man up. Just get a driving license. How many people do you... We all know them, right? We all know the musicians.
I know a few.
Yeah,
I know a few.
And unfortunately, they're always killing players, right? They're always the killing player, and they get by.
I don't have a car, man.
Oh, they just get by because they're great players. The only reason we know them, right, is because they're great players, and people put up with them not having a car. But, just like broadly speaking... I'm thinking about a few right now, and they're always like, they're great players. I've done many gigs with them. They always kill it, right? But there's always sort of like an element of, man, I wish I could get some more gigs. This is what they're saying. And like, I'm always like, dude, get a driving license. I mean, like, get a car. Because when people, it's the same thing what we were talking about in the earlier point, be a great communicator, same deal, right? When it comes to booking gigs, if somebody's thinking, oh, I'm going to get John Smith, right? Oh, that great bass player, John Smith. Oh, he hasn't got a car. It's instantly more anxiety because they're just like, oh, now I need to organize transport, or there's just going to be more crap to deal with. So just remove it and just get a driving license. It's not hard.
Yeah.
Look at all of the people driving around. Get over it. It's easy.
Oh, so it's so much. Also, I mean, this can trickle down into so many things. Also, get a bass. I actually know a couple of great players that don't that are like in between basses or something, and they're like, oh, hey, could I borrow or could I rent your? And I'm like, yes. Or get an amp, or like make sure to bring your power cord to your amp. Now, I mean, I've forgotten, you know what I mean? Like, I've forgotten that stuff before. We all have, but like, the people that are chronically like, they don't have a tuner. Or they don't have a, or they don't have a cart to load in the gear, and they're like, oh, hey, after you're done loading in, can I use your cart? And you're like, sure. But it's just, I don't know.
It's not, isn't it? Just get it together.
Yeah.
Get it together. I mean, maybe point number 9 should be just like, get it together. Get a driving license and get it together. And I do apologize for anybody that is like not a driver and you're just like, but it's so hard. Or all of the other things that you might be thinking about what I'm saying right now. Okay. That is all fine. It's fine. I apologize, but just get a driving license, right?
Yeah, or just
especially if you're trying to get gigs. Especially if you're trying to get gigs.
Or don't put the onus of the driving on the band. Like, figure out where you need to be and take care of the transportation. Don't make that, like, if you don't have a car, it's less about having a license and a car, Scott, right? And more about take care of the transportation. If you show up in an Uber, no one cares. If you show up via subway in New York, I mean, so many players in New York don't have a car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't make transportation the responsibility of the band leader, the drummer, like, take care of the transportation, don't moan about it. But if you're in the Midwest, like I am, get a car.
Get a driving license. Okay, number 10. Number 10's a bit of a weird one, right? But I've also got a bonus tip. I've got a number 11. I came up with 11, right? So number 10 is a bit of a weird one, left to center, but there we go. Be curious. Ask questions. Don't be the silent kid at the back of the class. And what that means is, I think that it's really easy to be like the silent kid at the back of the class who didn't know. You know what I mean? Like the teacher's like, any questions? And I'm speaking to me. I was the guy at the back of the class. I didn't ask. I wanted to. I was like, everybody understand this? What's on the board? And I'm like, I don't understand.
Right.
So like my point is, be curious and don't be the kid at the back of the classroom. And just, if you're not sure, ask. If you're on a gig and it's sort of like, just be curious and just ask people if, like, people are there to help you. You don't have to be the perfect, like it just doesn't, it actually, for me, it kind of, there's a barrier there. It puts up a barrier of actually bonding with the people in the band if you're not curious. And when I started gigging, maybe this could be part of the next one as well, the 10 commandments to keeping the gig. But when I first started gigging, I made a real point of, if I was unsure about like the ending on something or the intro or whatever it was, I'd go and ask. I wouldn't be like, maybe nobody noticed. I was like really curious, and I was really open, and I was just like really, communicative with everybody within the band, and just trying to be the best I could be,
Yeah, but that takes vulnerability and self-confidence, right? And sometimes we don't always enter situations with that level. I mean, I was definitely in my 20s the guy that didn't ask too. I mean, that was, like my story of faking that I knew McCartney and getting fired for my first session. Yeah. That was because I didn't ask. And there have been plenty of times on sessions where someone has said, oh man, like do that like Bruce Thomas thing with Elvis Costello. And I'd go, yep, yeah, cool. And then like later it'd be like, I should probably listen to, Elvis Costello. And I just, you're so inclined, you want to be cool, right? So you are inclined to just agree and not ruffle feathers and not be the one to say, I don't know what that is, because everyone assumes that you do. But there's so much more power in saying, geez, I should, but take the L. Accountability. Take it. Say, you know what? I actually don't know what that is. Can you play it for me quick? And then that actually creates an opportunity to bond over an experience.
Exactly.
Like I said that recently on a session. Someone mentioned like a band, like an indie rock band that I wasn't familiar with. And I was like, I actually totally don't know who that is. Will you just play it? And they're like, oh, for sure. And they pulled it up. And then I ended up loving the band and checking it out. And it actually increased, like it gave me more relational capital. And then I found a new band that I liked. And if I would have said, oh, yep, then I would have played and they would have thought, is he lying? Like, that's a terrible, like, does he actually know? Because he's not really playing like he does. Like, that's, you don't want that.
And it's easy to do that, isn't it? It's easy. It's so easy to be like, oh, yeah. don't do it.
Oh, it's far more easy to just agree and go with the flow. Like, oh yeah, totally. I know all the old Stones tunes and all the old Beatles tunes when nobody does.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody lies about that stuff, and it's so much more powerful to admit it, and then it creates an opportunity for you to actually grow the relationship too.
Yeah. So number 10, be curious and open. Ask questions. Don't be the silent kid at the back of the class. Bonus tip. Number 11.
I can't wait.
Practice your ass off whenever you can. Ultimately, your bass playing is where the book stops. You got
to be able to do the frickin' job.
You've got to be able to do the job.
You can be as nice. You can bring donuts to the gig. You can have a great amp. You can have a car. Maybe you wrote the chart. What are the other ones? Maybe
you've got a really big car and you can fit the rest of the band in it.
yeah. You've said yes to the low-paying gig. Like all the what are all of them? I mean, all the way up to the top. You've done all these things right. Hey, I've done all these things right. But if you can't frickin' play the bass,
you've got to. You've got to be continuously practicing and trying to get better at your craft.
Yeah.
The end.
The end.
The end. Yeah, and I think it's everybody kind of gets that, but it's just worth reminding. I just kind of sort of like wrapping up on that point that we've just all got to be continuously learning, and we can. It never really ends. Like, you've got to really, for me, fall in love with the learning experience.
Oh, yes.
Because that just makes it so much more enjoyable when you're in love with the actual experience of learning.
Yes, and I can see that in your playing. Like when I see you play, like when you got that new F bass and you were just playing that and posted some clips of you just playing it, I was like, oh, it's so good because and seeing you do that made me want an F bass. but maybe more than that. I mean, it made me want to pick. When you see someone that loves it, it makes you want to do the same thing. And I think and I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating for me that I really do think about practice as self-care. Instead of thinking about going into the shed where it's going to be dark and dank and horrible and your fingers are going to hurt and you're going to work on really complicated shit that you're never going to get together, What if you take small pieces, bite-sized pieces that are going to give you wins. You do, a small amount of time. You're in a comfortable space. You've thought about the lighting. You've thought, you get a nice rug. I mean, there's some very simple.
Hey, people might not have seen your rug. Ian's got a great rug.
Yeah. I'll put a pic of the rug on Instagram later. I mean, they're very small, inexpensive things that you can do to make your space nice. But really, it's about head, don't you think, Scott? It's it's about your mindset entering in that practice, and like what you said, fall in love with it. Figure out how to do that. What's kicking you? What is making you hate it? Are you trying to learn all of Teen Town in an afternoon? Don't do that to yourself. Break it out over a week. Learn the first 2 bars. Decide that is a huge win. You learn the first 2 bars and you can play at half speed of Teen Town in a practice session or a couple of practice sessions. That's a huge win.
It's huge, yeah.
So make sure that you don't want it too quickly, and that you're setting yourself up for success so that when you come back to reintegrate with the instrument to practice, to hold it, to play it, that you feel inspired and not discouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? Do you know when you talked about Teen Town, I also want to add as well, because that is what I would do. I'm definitely the Teen Town kid, right?
Yeah, come on, the whole thing.
The whole thing. I'm definitely the Teen Town kid, right? But also just put it out there as well for anybody that's not into like that thing about sort of like doing the whole Chopsy thing, like 2 players that really that jump to mind when I think about sort of like pro bass players doing it at a high level that aren't like Pino, because like Pino's sort of like, he's like God level. Do you know what I mean? Like he's just sort of like, he's on this kind of sort of like this. Yeah, and it's not that he's sort of like a better or worse player than anybody. It's just he's on that God level. He's not sort of like a normal guy. So when I think about the normal bass players, but people are doing it at a huge level, I kind of think of like Sean Hurley and John Button. I don't know why they jump to mind. But
absolutely,
the important thing about those 2 players are they're not very chopsy, right? They're just They're not very chopsy. They're just amazing from a musical perspective. They just do a great job of playing the bass. They just can do an absolute perfect job of what they're doing, and they're just sort of like the fully rounded musician, right? Yes. Side note that John Button is he's actually got scary chops, actually.
I know.
It's like, it's just, I think maybe something in his past, I'm not sure, but he's so great. But both of them, man, just great players. Great players.
Killing.
Yeah.
And Button can read, too. I mean, I know you know that because you did that reading thing with him. Yeah. But he is heavy. He is heavy. And it's that thing, I think we talked about this earlier, of like, it's that thing of driving a fast car slow. You know, like when you have that, there's nothing cooler than cruising in a car that has all this, you know, you're not always going 200 miles an hour, right? But you can. What if you can go 200 miles? You know, like that's the coolest thing. Yeah. So Button has got 200 miles an hour under the hood. He's got, he's got 600 horsepower. He's got a lot of torque.
He's got a lot of torque under that.
Yeah, but he's not going to use it. Like it's going to come out occasionally. He'll go, wow, I wonder if there's another gear in there, and there is.
Yeah, absolutely. So
cool.
So just to wrap that up, I'm just going to take everybody through it again. Number 1, community is everything. Number 2, don't be afraid of taking low and paid gigs. Number 3, have a level of visibility online. Number 4, create your own projects. Don't wait for the doorbell to ring, take control. Number 5, learn tunes and repertoire, jazz, pop, rock, metal. You'll be more employable. Number 6, learn to read and write charts. Notation is optional. Number 7, invest in your sound. Peeps love a great sounding bass and amp. Number 8, be a great communicator and a fast communicator via text, via DM, via email. Number 9, get a driving license. You don't want to be that girl or guy, or at least
get it together.
Or at least, to your point, Ian, don't rely on other people for transportation. Number 10, be curious and ask questions. Don't be the silent kid at the back of the class. And number 11, the bonus tip: practice your ass off whenever you can. Boom!
Damn right. Scott and Ian Show, bringing you that value you need to get the gig.
Exactly. And next up, number 10, next up in the, I don't know what episode we're on actually, but next up we're going to do the 10 commandments to keeping the gig.
Oh, yes. A slightly more subtle set of commandments that are going to dig into psychology, I imagine. A little bit more interpersonal skills.
Yeah, there's definitely some that sort of like overlap a little bit, but actually there's some fun ones actually that you'll be just like,
I can't wait.
Dude, you'll feel it.
Wait.
Anyway, dudes,
I can't wait.
Thanks for listening. We will be back with you next time. Take it easy. I'll see you in the shed.
Cheers, everybody.